Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
He said he gon' huff and puff and blow my mind up. You meet an island girl, she might Jxxiii wind up.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show. I want to thank Jxxiii for the intro music. You can find a link to her music in the show description. My guest today is Vickie Gould. Over 10.7 million people around the world have experienced Vickie's sound healing baths. She's an 11-time best-selling author, certified Law of Attraction Practitioner, energy and sound healer, master herbalist, Reiki Master, and I'm probably gonna get this one wrong, Ho'oponopono warrior. Did I get that right?
Ho'oponopono.
Ho'oponopono warrior, and she's been trained by Joe Vitale and Lisa Nichols of The Secret. Through her journey with chronic Lyme disease, she's come to understand the mind, body, and spirit connection. And this is where she immersed herself in learning more about energy, vibrations, and frequencies she can enhance, so she could enhance her own healing journey. And she's been featured on, CBS, NBC, HuffPost, and won numerous awards as well. Vickie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. Yes, I'm excited to have you here too. So I always like to start off with, and probably the listeners are going to get tired of me keep saying this every time as my first question. But, when we were growing up and we're, maybe we were in our elementary, we're like, I want to be a fireman or policeman or a teacher or a doctor or whatever. It's like, no one really thinks about, I'm going to be a herbalist and Reiki master and et cetera, et cetera. So how did you come into this?
Well, that's a good question. So when I was little, I actually just wanted to be famous. I watched Lawrence Welk with my parents. So I'm dating myself. Watched Lawrence Welk put on my patent leather shoes, tap danced in front of the TV, and thought I was going to one day, I don't know, be on Lawrence Welk or something. But what actually happened was, I did the normal thing. Went to school. My parents were very much into grades and, getting a good education and all of that stuff. I actually wanted to go to art school. And my mom said, no, you can't do that. You're going to be a poor, starving artist. You can't do that. So I got a very geeky, nerdy degree in actuarial math, climbed the corporate ladder, did that thing for a while and sat there and went, okay, is this really all there is? And then after I had my child, I ended up becoming a stockbroker so that I could have a little more freedom. And then after that, I ended up getting sick. So I contracted chronic Lyme disease. And for a while there, they didn't know what was going on with me. Every name, fibro, chronic fatigue, lupus, all these other things, cognitive disorder, dementia, they named everything. And then eventually a friend of mine recommended her doctor, which figured out that I had Lyme disease. And, by that time, it had been quite some time that I had been suffering with it. And so then it really had a big hold on me. And that's where one of my doctors recommended a Rife machine, which is a frequency generator.
Yeah.
And yeah. So if people don't know what that is, you kind of think about how you rub a wine glass, right? And it makes sound, and eventually you can just explode that glass. And that's kind of the same concept, where they have figured out frequencies for different organisms and pathogens and things for your body. And that gets zapped into, and that's how we killed off a lot of the Lyme, amongst other things that I did, including becoming a master herbalist and all that stuff to help myself. So that's how that happened. I became aware of how everything in the world is a frequency. And it just kind of blew my mind in a way that, oh, wow, wait a minute, this causes an imbalance. And if I can get my body back in balance, you mean that I'm not going to feel so bad anymore? So that's how that all happened.
Awesome. So just fun fact, Vickie, you probably don't know this about me, but you said, actuarial math. I actually was a CPA in my first profession in the corporate world. So not quite the same, but kind of that same sort of
nerdy math people unite.
Yeah,
right?
trajectory for sure. And quite often it's our own, usually through necessity, as it was with myself. I'm trying to heal ourselves, that we find our new life, our new passion, whatever. Right. Curious, so, a couple questions right off the bat. So the person you finally did see, were they like a functional medicine doctor or? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's typically, unfortunately, what we have to find to
absolutely not covered by insurance. Everything's out of pocket, that kind of thing. Yeah.
It's funny that I didn't realize that part of your story as in depth. But just funny enough, yesterday, the day of a recording here, my wife was talking to one of my kids' parents, the moms, and she has been suffering with Lyme as well. And that got a little bit of an internal discussion in our household. There's quite a bit of correlation between Lyme and mold, and sometimes Lyme is actually misdiagnosed, actually mold stuff. So I'm just curious, how did mold fit into your diagnosis?
That's an interesting question. Not too many people have brought that up because they don't know the correlation. So I actually was diagnosed with sick building syndrome in the process of it all. I look back and sometimes I wonder, did I have Lyme first and then the mold was able to get a hold of me, or did I have the mold issue first and then Lyme was able to get a hold of me? I recall way back, we had a house that flooded, the basement flooded, and had gone out of town. And so I was left alone with this basement trying to, clean it up and all that stuff. And I remember that I finally got it all cleared up. The water's gone, luckily it wasn't a finished basement. So at least we had that going for us. But I remember then getting so sick and feeling like very dizzy, very nauseous, literally crawling on the floor. I called my sister-in-law and I said, my husband's not, her brother, my husband's not home. Mike's not home. Can you come get my daughter, Stephanie? She was like 2.5, 3, something like that. And I said, I cannot take care of her. And so she drove an hour and a half to my house to come get her because I was literally crawling on the floor at that point. And I sometimes look back at that and wonder if that illness was really the mold sickness that just got a hold of me because I was cleaning up that basement for days.
Yeah, it depends on, I guess, who you listen to, but a lot of people seem to think mold is usually the first thing, and then Lyme is kind of the body's response to it. But that's maybe a bit up for debate. I'm just curious, and I love that you brought up the Rife machine and frequencies, and we'll get more into that. I'm just curious, do you have your own Rife machine now, or have you just kind of learned to?
No, I definitely bought the Rife machine because, traveling to the doctor, paying for the Rife treatment, and then traveling back, just the travel was enough to do me in those days. I couldn't drive very far. And so I ended up getting the cheapest Rife machine that I could afford. It was maybe 500, a little over that. And then eventually, as time went on, I got to more sophisticated machines. So I went from the digital Rife, the digital Rife digital to the EM-EM5. And then I got a True Rife. And then now I have cheap coils. So that combines PEMF and Rife machine together.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of so Vickie said PEMF there. PEMF is how I usually pronounce it, so pulse electromagnetic frequencies. And I have a device for healing that I use for myself when needed as well. So really cool. And I have to admit, I've never used a Rife machine myself, but anecdotally from people I've talked to, huge benefits and healing and that sort of thing. So that's amazing. And maybe offline, Vickie, you can send me a link for some resource and we can put it in the show notes for people, because there might be some people who are just like, what are you guys talking about here? Type of thing. Let's go back to frequencies. So and of course there's different types of frequencies, right? Like light is a frequency, and there's magnetic frequencies, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd love to get your take, and it's just kind of top of mind. And unfortunately, the charging dock is within arm's reach, but not the device itself. So I can't hold it up in front of the camera. But I have, and I won't mention the name because I don't have any affiliation with them or anything like that. But I have a device basically a necklace that I wear around my neck or even wear on the head that uses magnetic frequencies to induce certain states. So it could be for deep sleep, could be REM sleep, muscle relaxation. I've even experimented I forget what they call it, their social mode. It basically can induce the effects of as if you had a drink or two and be a little bit more sociable. And then of course, when the timer runs out and the setting stops and you don't feel that social lubrication, so to speak. So what are your thoughts on maybe sort of those type of, let's call it wearables or devices too?
Oh yeah, I love them all. I have a store. We have many of those, like red light therapy, the PEMF, like you were saying. And I use those things basically on a daily basis. It's part of my maintenance mode. So I love all of those things.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I do many things too, not every day, but quite often. And the device I just mentioned, I quite often will use relax mode in the last, bit while I'm kind of done for the day and maybe
Yeah.
watching some TV or something. And then I'll throw in the REM sleep mode and throw that. Of course, as we all know, that there's a million factors that go into your sleep. So just because I have it on REM sleep doesn't mean I have good REM sleep because I did something else to mess it up. But I do tend to use it nearly every day.
Yeah.
You bring up an interesting point. So you said, just a moment ago, you said, kind of like the maintenance. So you need to use these sort of devices or modalities. You didn't say that, but I'll extend it out. How do you feel like if you maybe it's a travel day or something and you don't get to, like, how does that affect your health?
Yeah, these days I recover a lot faster than I did before. So back in the thick of things, in 2009 to about 2015, I could only choose so many things to do in a day, right? And most of the time I had to choose drive the kids to school, drive them back, those types of things. And I really had to save up. I don't know if you know the spoon theory, how people with chronic illness often say, I only have so many spoons.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so,
Okay. Gotcha. Yes. I heard that. First I was like, what are you talking about? Yes. Yeah. Maybe you could explain for the audience because people maybe aren't familiar with that.
yeah. So in a nutshell, people don't understand a lot of times because invisible illnesses, we look great. You don't see anything visible. We're just telling you we're tired, we are brain foggy, we don't sleep well, we have digestion issues, but you don't see that. You see us, and we don't show up in public unless we can. And then we put on a brave face, right? If I couldn't go out, I would stay at home, and so we're often declining invitations. And eventually people just stop asking because they figure you're just going to keep saying no. And actually, we'd prefer if you kept asking because it helps us understand that, you still want us in your life and you still care about it. It's just we can't attend. So a lot of times we talk about that in terms of spoons. I only have like X number of spoons per day. And I use a spoon for cooking. I use a spoon to drive my kids to school. I use a spoon to clean the toilet because I could not clean the whole entire bathroom. It was the toilet, the mirror, or the sink, not all together, right? And so you use these spoons throughout the day and eventually you have no more spoons left. And that's, what they talk about with the spoons that people don't understand. We have a limited number and we have to prioritize those spoons. And eventually through the day, we don't have them. So very, very earlier on, like that 2009 to 2015 time, it got better as time went on, obviously, but I really had 3 spoons. I couldn't do more than 3 things in one day. And I really had to pick and choose what those things were. And then eventually now like I say, I have maintenance mode. So before we got on this call, I've already soaked in the bathtub with Epsom salt and baking soda for the day. I did that a little earlier than normal just because I knew this was coming up. I do have a exercise routine because that does help me to feel a little bit better as well. There's certain foods that I have to stay away from. And then I have a bowl full of, herbs and supplements to make sure that my body's getting the help that it needs along the way. And then very often, almost daily, I'm using my Rife machine and my PEMF, whichever way. You're probably right, because I hear people say that more than the way that I say it. I also have a heating mat with 7 different crystals. It also has photon, negative ion, FAR, all of that stuff as well. Different days, I will also use my tuning forks for pain or headaches or whatever it is that I need. A lot of times what I'm doing is I'm prioritizing my sleep and I'm prioritizing my detox. Those were the things that became very, very important for me to feel better. And I know if I don't get enough sleep, I can stay up late one night or maybe 2 nights in a row now, and be okay. But I still do have to catch up. Sometimes when we travel or if I go to an event and there's a lot of activities going on, it really does create a bit of a crash, but not nearly like it was years before. So I'm very thankful for that.
Got it. Yeah. So just to circle back, so Vickie said, early on she only had 3 spoons in a day, and and I know I've known people that had, you use the term, these invisible or hidden illnesses,
Yep.
and some days they have 3 spoons, some days they have 5, and some days they don't
No
even
spoon.
have no spoons. So, you brought up an interesting point as well, just going back to, sort of that social, well, one, I guess how people don't see it or they don't understand it. And if they've never had anyone in their family who's experienced, they don't understand, again, let's use the term sort of hidden or invisible diseases.
Yeah.
But it just goes, I think, to the point, I'd love to get your take on this on, you said, people just stop inviting you when and that, I think there's that, I don't know, that missing communication piece where, it's an uncomfortable conversation. People don't understand. I don't know. I'd love to get your take, Vickie. Like, I'm sure you probably like, hey, I'm going through this, and just people don't guess. You probably get, I'm surmising here, you tell me, where you just stop telling people how you're feeling because nobody wants to hear it. And then you just kind of drift apart. Because I think that communication and keeping that community and those relationships intact is so important for the person who's struggling.
Yeah, it definitely is, because you end up feeling very alone. At least now, there's Facebook groups and forums and things like that you can join. But, back in 2009, it wasn't as prevalent to have all these online things that you could connect with. So I'm glad that there is that for people these days. But very often, I think I am also making assumptions here too. People who are inviting eventually just assume, because you've said no so many times, that you're going to say no again. Or they think, well, they don't want to come, so I'm not going to invite them. Or they think, they don't really want to be friends with me anymore. They might take different interpretations depending on the person. That's really not it. The other thing too is I think they get tired of us talking about it. So with a chronic illness, this really is an obsession for the whole day. I say obsession loosely because it's not really a great obsession, but it is something that you have to work with every single day. I would tell people that I didn't know how I was going to feel until I sat up and my feet hit the ground. What hurt? What was bothering me? Was I okay? Because, a lot of times I'm half sleeping because I've got pain in the middle of my sleep and I'm readjusting and, feeling that while I'm sleeping. So your sleep's not real great, like I said, and people just tend to drop off. People don't want to hear you talk about it all the time. They're like, I've had friends that go, do you really need to talk about this that much? I'm like, okay, well, if you're asking me about my day, this is what's consuming my day. And if you want to hear and care about what's going on with me, then, that's it. And we often would say that if we called it something else, that maybe people would understand, and not to make light of anybody who's had cancer. It's a horrible disease, but many people in the Lyme community would say, if we just called it Lyme cancer instead, that we would get a little bit more of compassion from the world, compassion from friends, from people understanding that this is a long-term thing. I will live with this and maintain it for the rest of my life, and I will deal with the things for the rest of my life. I will have arthritis and joint and muscle problems and cognitive issues, most likely for the rest of my life. And people they just don't understand that, because they look at me and they go, oh, you're so young looking and you seem to be able to go out and do things and whatever, but everything is a very conscious choice.
Yeah, it's parallel that with some of my own experiences, obviously not with Lyme, but or even certainly with, I guess it ultimately boils down to like my health challenges I overcome and how I choose to live forward. But again, similar type of thing was like, no, I'm just not going to go hang out with X people that I know from high school, university, because I know what you guys do. It's like, that's not me anymore. I don't go and drink and go pizza and whatever. I'm not saying I don't do those things in moderation, but like,
right.
These people don't do moderation. So like, I just have to not be in that environment, because then I just suffer with it afterwards. So, and then, over time, just like, you just don't get the invite anymore, which is okay. I'm okay with that, type of thing. Cause I moved in a different direction.
It really does show for you people, whether it's their own upbringing, bias, whatever, their reactions to you explaining to them about your illness, it sometimes shows their true colors about, do they really care about me? Because if they did, they would most likely let me vent and listen. Like, I'm just going to throw it out there that girlfriends can get together and complain about the kids and the husband and this, and we never get tired of it. Right. But if you go out and you're talking about your illness, eventually people get tired of it. It's just an interesting thing, right? And I can count on my hands how many people truly stayed and stuck by me who said, oh, I'm sorry you're not feeling well, or even checked in with me after a while. When I first got diagnosed, people were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry and everything. And then after a while, it just became old news, and I feel like they got tired of it. Didn't get a lot of support. I did put together a book. It's called The Waiting Room, and we had stories from different people who had Lyme, or even the parents who had children with Lyme. And one of them that really hit me, it was entitled, Where's My Casserole? And she talked about how if we had a different diagnosis, if we had something that people understood, if it wasn't invisible, people would be showing up to the doorstep to help her out or deliver. And this was a mom of a child, or delivering food and meals and helping out more. But instead you get nothing because they don't think you need a casserole. So.
Yeah. So a couple different questions here, but let's go this direction. So yeah. Do you think it's, and I off the top of my head, I have no idea on the stats. Obviously there's dozens, if not more, types of cancers, and let's just use cancer as the comparison because you brought it up earlier. And certainly there's shades of, and I'm going to lump mold and Lyme together. Obviously they're different things, but and there's definitely different shades and grays of that. But do you think if we had a better, what's the word I'm for? Education campaign, or we've had 40 years or longer of like the fight against cancer, which we're obviously not winning, for how much money we've thrown at it. That's a different story for another time. But if we had something like that would maybe change people's perception.
Maybe. I do think that people are becoming more aware. More people are being diagnosed properly, because it's misdiagnosed as hundreds of other things.
Sure.
MS, lupus, early onset osteoarthritis, juvenile arthritis, dementia, Alzheimer's, ALS. It's just diagnosed as so many other things that I think definitely more awareness. Like if you look at the statistics on West Nile, and what's the other one? Starts with a Z.
Zika?
Yes. If you look at the statistics on that and how many people contract that every year, and how big of, newscasters talking about it, articles, all these things written about it. If you compare the two, Lyme is like far outweighs those two combined in terms of the number of cases every year. And yet it's not talked about enough. That's one of the things that I brought up when I was on CBS, just even, gosh, I think that was in the last month or so, because Lyme awareness was in May. So sorry
to interrupt, Vickie, but there's a good point. I don't know. I'm in this field, in the health and wellness field. I didn't know it was Lyme Awareness Month myself. So yeah, you just proves your point, right?
Right. And, it's just, I think awareness brings understanding, which then brings compassion, which would help as well. The other thing that I said in that newscast was that suicide is one of the top reasons why people die of Lyme, is because of the isolation, the depersonalization, the lack of social ability, the mental, stuff that's going on, the amount of pain that they're in, the doctors not believing them. Many people are told it's in their head. You're denied for disability. I was denied the first time I applied for disability, and I only got disability the second time because I got a different lawyer, and we applied for fibromyalgia. We did not apply for Lyme because they don't believe that Lyme exists. And some at some time, they didn't believe Lyme existed in certain states even. And Lyme is on ticks, right? And any biting insect, really. And so ticks take rides on birds. So birds can come from Canada down to Florida. They migrate, they go all over.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's a place that doesn't have Lyme now.
And it's not like they go, oh, wait, this is the border of my state, I can't cross over. So the sheer idea that it's not in certain areas is just crazy. My daughter also contracted Lyme
No.
when she was in her teens. We believe that it's from, they had a volunteer thing for school, high school, where they went to clean up a local park and she got bit behind the ear. And when I took her to the doctor, I said, I want you to test her for Lyme. And he's like, oh, you're just a crazy, overbearing mom who thinks everything is Lyme. 6 months later, she's got Lyme. She's like got tingling. She's not able to stand up. The new doctor that I went took her to was primary, and unbeknownst to me, tested her for Lyme. The hospital didn't believe that, and it's a university hospital, so it didn't believe that Lyme existed. The CDC ended up calling me because we're listed, right, as having Lyme, a CDC positive. They called me and they wanted to know where she had been. Had she been out of Michigan? No, because, and my assumption, and I could be putting words in their mouths, don't quote me on this one, is that they wanted to know where she had been so they could continue to say that Lyme does not exist in my state.
Got it. You know, you bring up an interesting point, and, you know, it goes beyond just Lyme, but like many other things as well, you know, and I think it goes to, and again, we could talk ad nauseum about this and we won't go that direction, but, you know, just the limitations of training of doctors, particularly primary doctors. And you're in the US. I live up here in Canada. I mentioned this conversation my wife had with someone, you know, just yesterday. I have a friend, a couple of people I know up here in Canada, and I'd love to get your take on this, Vickie. You kind of touched on it a bit, but basically up here in Canada, like, you have to go privately. You have to go, you know, out of pocket to a functional medicine doctor to get proper testing. My daughter's friend's mom, who my wife was talking to yesterday, ended up sending her tests. This was a number of years ago now. I think it's a little bit more accessible, but still privately. But she ended up sending her labs away to Germany to get properly diagnosed.
Oh, wow.
You know, like, that's like, it just, it's a limitation. And again, not to beat that horse to death, but I guess it sounds like it's kind of the same in the US, or at least in Michigan anyway.
Right. There's one place in the US, in Palo Alto, called Jxxiii, that is the place that I would most trust with testing for Lyme. Most of the testing that is done was never meant, it was never meant to be a diagnostic tool. The tests that were created were not meant to be a diagnostic tool. However, most doctors are told that this is a definitive yes or no. And the other thing that's really interesting is that there are bands. So you have different bands with Lyme. And they say that if you have 3 or more bands of Lyme, then you have Lyme. But if you have less than that, you don't have Lyme. And I'm kind of like, it's either you're pregnant or you're not pregnant.
I was just going to use that same example. I was just going to use
right? You have a line, you got the line on the stick, or you don't have the line on the stick. Same thing. You either have the bands or you don't have the bands. So technically, I am not CDC positive for Lyme disease, and yet it kept me in bed. It kept me in bed for years, 16 to 18 hours. I could barely get out of bed. My daughter is CDC positive for Lyme. Luckily, she was diagnosed within the year that she got it. And for me, it probably was more like 5 to 7 years that it took them to figure it out. And so we got to it a little bit earlier. And her case is, it has different, you know, it presents differently in everybody, but she is way more functional than I was, yet she is considered CDC positive and I'm not.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point as well, just I guess in general, but we're specifically talking Lyme here. And again, this is third hand, and I'm not a Lyme expert. Again, this is just from what this person had told my wife yesterday, that first 6 months is, you know, really critical. That if you can kind of catch it and get proper treatment in the first 6 months, you have a much better outlook, I guess, for lack of a better term. Would you say that's true?
Yes, from what I understand, yes, because Lyme loves to burrow into muscles and joints and brain and spine. And it has a way of tricking your white blood cells. You know, the soldiers in your body will just march right by them thinking there's nothing wrong. And so it's a spirochete, and it just takes this little corkscrew and burrows itself into different parts of your body. So the earlier you can get to it, the less places it has burrowed and hidden itself in your systems, your organs, you know, all of that stuff. So definitely. And for sure, the antibiotic treatment that a lot of people will say, oh, if you've got a couple rounds of antibiotics, you can't possibly still have Lyme. Like that's a whole nother thing that doctors will say. We've already cured you. So whatever you have post afterwards, it's in your head, you're imagining it, whatever. We've already eradicated this from your system. So definitely if you could get that antibiotic treatment earlier on, then that's a lot more helpful.
Not to, not to go down a different path or change topics, but it kind of reminds me of, if someone would have like parasites or something in their intestinal tract, or, in their GI tract, again, it depends on the cycle of antibiotics, right? If the parasites are not, I might be using the wrong terminology here, they're not awake or they're not hatched or whatever, and you do that round of treatment, you completely miss them. And then they are up later, or hatch later, and then when you're not taking them, then you have all these issues again. Sounds
right. And there's whole
some parallels
discussion
there.
We could get into about how antibiotics kill all your gut flora and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, well that's round two. We'll do.
Yeah. So I was on antibiotics for 7 to 9 months. I don't recall anymore how long it was, but after a while, I said to the doctor, I think this is actually making me feel worse, and I can't continue to go this way. And that's actually when I switched to the Reiki machine and found another doctor to help me with some stuff, and I'm like, I just can't be on long-term antibiotics for this length of time. And it took me many years to fix the gut issue that happened after that. Yeah.
The more I talk to you, like, I have to admit, I've passively in the past, like, as through research or listening to someone on a podcast or something, the Reiki machine's been in my radar for, I don't know, 7-8 years or something like that. And I was like, it's always seemed like that'd be a nice to have, one day, and I don't suffer. I'm managing all my stuff and type of thing. But again, I'm about optimal performance. So like, how if I eke out and so I don't know. I might have to revisit it, trying to get a machine after our conversation today. So sounds good. So again, I guess we've talked a lot about health. This isn't a health specific podcast. And Vickie, you kind of sort of touched on it earlier, but I'll just sort of ask it maybe a different way. Like, what does, like your health routine or morning routine look like now? You kind of touched about earlier what you have to do to prepare, even to just sit and have a conversation with me, but like maybe a little bit broader. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I guard my sleep like crazy. So I sleep in, I am an entrepreneur. I own my own business. Part of that, I jokingly talk about it in terms of, I was otherwise unemployable. I need too many accommodations. So I had to go into business for myself. Luckily, through the years, it has really flourished and blossomed, and it's been great. But I just want to stick in a little nudge there about people who are like, oh, you got to get up at 4 a.m. or you're never going to be successful. Wrong. Guard your sleep. I was at an event one time, and it was really funny. There were health coaches there. And at the time I was really trying to do more with like being this master herbalist and helping people with chronic illness at that time. And it was so funny because the question was, what time does everybody get up? And so you had all these entrepreneurs who were different types of coaches and whatever, so 4 a.m., 3 a.m., crazy people getting up at 2 a.m., 6 a.m., things like that. And then all the health coaches, I noticed 8 a.m. and later. We all got up at 8 a.m. or later. And it was just funny the way that those people knew we have to guard our sleep. And so that's one thing very important, is guarding my sleep. I every day soak in the bathtub. Depends on how much time I have. So if I don't have a lot of time, maybe it's 20 or 30 minutes. And other days I could be in there for 2 hours. My mom is like, how do you sit in there for 2 hours? I'm like, well, I do a chakra cleanse and I do a negativity cleanse and I throw things down I wash things off with the water and throw it down the drain. And I do all these other things. Sometimes I am on my phone. Sometimes I am watching TV. It just depends on the day. And then I'll refill it. If it gets cold, I just refill it. I love running the jets and stuff. The magnesium helps my muscles. It helps my brain. It helps my relaxation. It helps my sleep. So I throw Epsom salt, baking soda in there. And then sometimes I will also add food grade hydrogen peroxide because that will oxygenate the pores, the plasma and go through the pores. And then I have, like I said, a pile of pills that I take, lots of vitamin C, lots of magnesium, same reasons, helping the guts and, digestion and sleep and all of that stuff in there. I take something for the Lyme. So I take astragalus, take milk thistle for detox, a lot of stuff, just a lot of stuff throughout the day. Generally every couple of hours, I'm taking something. Just because I need to. And if I don't, I'm okay probably for a day, but after a couple of days, I can really feel the difference in what I do because I have tried. Who wants to take a pile of pills every day, right? Even if they're not pharma and they're mostly herbs or supplements and things like that, who wants to take a pile of pills? So every once in a while, I'll try to not take certain ones. And I'm like, oh man, I got to keep taking that. So it is what it is. And that's mostly the maintenance. I do try to get up and move a little bit more just because my joints get very sore or creaky or, stuff like that. So, yeah.
I'm going to ask a selfish question here because it's for my own
Sure.
knowledge here. So the astragalus you mentioned earlier, what is that helping you with, or what's the mechanism of
It's
action?
an antiviral, antibacterial. So it's helping to knock down the Lyme that is still there because Lyme is going to multiply. And I just don't feel like it's ever going to get eradicated, like I said, because all the places that it's hiding in my body. So I want to be able to have something in there that's going to knock it down every day.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I take that almost every day as well, not for Lyme, obviously, but just as as a, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, just an immune booster, basically. Yeah, awesome. So let me ask you this last question here as we start to wrap up here. So if you could go back, and let's put a health bend on it here. If you could go back to talk to your 20-year-old self, or maybe some earlier period in your life, what advice would you give yourself?
Wow. In terms of my health, that's an interesting one because I was going to ask this one in terms of like business or lessons learned and stuff like that. In terms of my health, wow. I think I probably would have advocated more. I mean, I was pretty adamant about certain things, but I would have advocated more for figuring out what was wrong with me. I would have probably approached the disability thing a little bit differently, knowing what I know. And I probably would not have let the doctors run over me about getting my daughter tested. I would have been like, I don't care. You can call me a crazy Lyme mom, but she looks like to me that she has Lyme, only to be right. 6 months later, I really wish that I would have done more at that time. But yeah. Disclaimer, though, that we have to say in everything is I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not diagnosing anything. Don't take any of my advice over anything that your doctor has said, blah, blah, blah. Don't do any of that. Because, everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own thing. And whoever's listening, like, we don't know you, right? We don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that answer, Vickie, because I think regardless, it's across the board. You need to be your own advocate for your own health. No one cares more about your health than you.
Yeah.
Not your kids, not your husband, certainly not your doctor, not the system. You have to take responsibility for your own health. So I love that answer.
One more thing that I probably would have done is that I would have been more aware about food. That was a huge lesson for me about cleaning up my food. Like I ate horribly through college, was sick much of college. Took many rounds of antibiotics at that time because of how sick I kept getting in college. And I think that was a detriment that just gave, it almost gave the right environment, right? Because I was not taking care of myself very well. And then once I cleaned things up, so I think I would have liked to be a little more educated on food and nutrition at an earlier age. So
yeah, that's also great advice. And Vickie, I don't think you know this about me, but I was morbidly obese as a teenager. So I was 100 pounds heavier than I am now. And not to get into my backstory here as we were trying to wrap up, but making proper food choices, nutritional choices, as I was trying to heal my back, was, the last 60 of that 100 pounds I lost, like, went away like that once I cleaned up my diet. And it's evolved over time as I learned more and stuff, of course. But that was the big driver. So I think nutrition is a big lever that people can pull regarding their health. So thank you for that. So you have a gift for the listeners. It's a sound healing certification program. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Oh, well, the sound healing certification is not a gift.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I do have a course on sound healing that you can get certified in. It is accredited through the Complementary Medical Association. So we have different levels of sound healing, but I do have a gift. We do have free affirmations that go through all the chakras in one per day so that you can clear and balance and align those. And I'm happy to give those to you. And then if you are interested in sound healing, we have awesome discounts and stuff to get into that. If that's
awesome. So we'll make sure we have all the links, both to the affirmations and to the course in the show description and everywhere this podcast will be found. So Vickie, any last words or wisdom or golden nuggets for the audience before we wrap up?
Gosh, I think we've given a lot of golden nuggets already. I really think that the last thing that I would say is, if it doesn't feel right in your gut, like, follow your instincts, trust your instincts. If whatever you're being told just doesn't feel like it's a match for you, don't let it be explained away by logic. So often we are told that we have to see to believe, or we have to prove, or whatever. I think that then negates a lot of times that thing that we have a knowing inside of us that just doesn't seem really right for me. So I guess that kind of goes along with the advocating for yourself, but trust yourself. There's reasons why you feel a certain way about something, right? And if you don't trust a doctor, or you don't think what he's saying is the right thing for you, keep searching.
Absolutely. I love that advice. So advocate for yourself, trust your gut. I think that's the underlying message here for everyone watching. So Vickie, again, thank you. I appreciate you being on the show, and it was great having a very interesting conversation. We could certainly do a round 2 at some point, I think.
I know. I feel like
topics.
We can maybe do 10 of them, Deepak.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. We'll talk offline.
There's a lot. Yeah. I had
Again,
I had a good time. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. So I'm going to throw it back to Jxxiii for some outro music to lead us out. Thank you for listening and or watching the Deepak Saini Show. And remember, exceptional results for the exceptional you. Till next time.
Podcast produced by the Minted Green Company,